New York, Friday night, crystal chandeliers, bad champagne, and my wife toasting her own brilliance. Then she said it, loud enough for her married boss to hear. I could dump him tomorrow. He's worthless. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I slipped past the coat check, felt the cold air hit my face, and dialed one number, the compliance guy who used to be my friend. In 60 seconds, you'll see why silence beats the loudest scene. Because when you nudge the right domino, careers don't collapse, they implode. Inside that ballroom, phones would rise, names would be called, and a reputation built on credit cards and lies would finally meet the bill. Tonight wasn't about rage, it was about receipts, paper, digital, and the kind you can't talk your way out of. She called me worthless. Watch what a worthless man can do with a calm voice, a phone call, and the truth. Stay. You'll want to see the rest. My name is Mark Anderson. I'm 34, the kind of man who balances a checkbook down to the penny and keeps the oil changes on schedule. I grew up in Ohio, learned to fix a leaky sink from my dad, and say thank you to the cashier even when the line is slow. I'm not flashy. I buy shoes when the soles go, not when the style does. I track our 401k, pay the mortgage early when I can, and keep a little cash in an envelope because my grandfather swore by it. People like me don't light up a room. We make sure the lights stay on. And for 8 years, I thought that was enough. The truth is, being steady is invisible until the ground starts shaking. When you hit a storm, you learn if you packed the right tools. That night in New York, under a ceiling full of crystals, I realized I might need more than a wrench and a calm voice. Emily Roberts could sell sunscreen in January. She was born with perfect posture and a calendar full of names you've seen on office doors. She worked in marketing and spoke fluent elevator pitch. New handbag, new project, new contacts. She collected momentum like other people collect coffee mugs. Emily loved the chase, the crowded rooftop bar, the quick laugh, the way a room tilted toward her when she started a story. At home, she preferred reservations to recipes, and if I suggested leftovers, she'd arch an eyebrow like I'd told a joke without a punchline. None of that made her a villain. Ambition isn't a crime. But ambition with no guardrails tends to roll downhill over whoever's in the way. The longer we were married, the more I felt like the quiet stretch of road between her exits. That Friday, watching her glide through coworkers and compliments, I saw something I'd never admitted. She needed an audience, and I was starting to feel like the stagehand. 8 years of marriage looks like soft habits, the Sunday list on the fridge, the text me when you're close, the way you know which chair squeaks. We built a life that worked, on paper, same bank accounts, same dentist, same holiday flight every other year. But our tempo changed. I liked dinner at the table, phones face down. She liked cocktails and name tags. I liked hiking upstate on Saturdays. She liked just one more event. If you're over 30, you know how quiet distance grows. A skipped joke, a late night, a new password. Nothing explodes. It just erodes. We still said love you like brushing teeth, but a ritual without attention turns into noise. I tried to bridge the gap with small fixes, flowers, a weekend in Boston, learning her podcasts. She nodded, said thanks, kept moving. I told myself seasons shift, that we'd find the beat again. The thing about drift is you don't feel it until the shore is gone. That night, I finally looked up. Emily loved networking the way some folks love golf. Not for fun, for leverage. She had a sixth sense for the power table and a smile that said, I belong there. I don't blame her. Work in big cities runs on handshakes and follow-ups. But the habit grew teeth. Weeknights became quick drinks. Weekends became must-show face. I tried going along. I shook hands, asked about projects, survived jokes about spreadsheets. I stood by the bacon-wrapped shrimp and pretended the view mattered. But I'm the guy who knows the janitor's name, not the investors. I believe in fixing the printer, not circling back. Older friends told me, that's marriage, compromise. I did. I wore the jacket, tied the tie, smiled for pictures. Yet every event felt like walking uphill in dress shoes. I kept counting the ways I could be useful. She kept counting the rooms where I didn't fit. When she pressed me to attend the quarterly celebration, I said yes. I didn't know I was walking into a lesson. The email had confetti in the subject line. The hotel had a name that sounded like it charged for air. Emily called it Important FaceTime. I called it Friday. She picked a silver dress that caught light like a mirror ball. I ironed a shirt I saved for weddings and warnings. On the ride over, we passed couples arguing about parking and tourists pointing at buildings. She refreshed her lipstick at a red light and told me, again, not to be so quiet around her boss. I promised to try. Marriage is full of small promises you make because you love peace. The elevator opened to a ballroom where money had been sprayed on everything. The kind of place where a station serves food you can eat in one bite and forget in two. I practiced 3 safe questions, tucked them behind a smile, and told myself this was support. I didn't know the word would change before midnight, from support to witness. Ballrooms pretend to be warm, but they're built to keep you moving. The air is cold, the lights are flattering but blind. Music smooths over awkward pauses. I found the coat check and posted up like a security camera with better manners. From there, I could see everything without being seen. Emily sparkled, laughing, touching elbows, reintroducing people who met last month. I nodded at a bartender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else and let the ice in my glass find its own pace. If you've ever stood at your kid's recital and realized you can't hear their note in the choir, you know the feeling. Present, but not invited. My phone stayed face down. Good habit, bad alibi. I told myself I'd give it an hour, then call a car and read a paperback in bed. But the room had other plans. A voice rose above the music, a laugh that turned heads, and a sentence I can't unhear. You never think the knife will be labeled. Most cuts are accidental, missed birthdays, tired words. This one wore a name tag. Emily, head back, glass raised, said, "I could dump him tomorrow. He's worthless." She wasn't whispering. She wanted the echo. Her boss, Richard Collins, ring tan and expensive confidence, stood close enough to count her eyelashes. People smirked like they'd been handed free popcorn. I didn't look heroic. I didn't shout her name or flip a table. My face did what it's trained to do in hard times. Nothing. When my father had his scare and we waited for the doctor, I learned how stillness can hold a man together. I set my glass down, thanked the nearest server, because manners cost nothing, and walked toward the door. If you're over 30, you know the choice. Make a scene and feed the gossip, or make a move and change the story. I chose the second. Outside, the city felt colder and cleaner. On the sidewalk, I found my breath where my pride should have been. The traffic hissed like a distant storm. I've always believed in quiet fixes, label the wires, keep copies of receipts, know where the warranties live. Tonight, those habits felt less boring and more like armor. I didn't want revenge that burned fast and left me with ash. I wanted clarity, and I wanted proof. I scrolled to a name I hadn't used in years, Ryan Miller. We did a case competition in college. He kept the rules in his head and the facts on paper. Now he works in compliance, which is a fancy way of saying he knows where a company hides the broom and what's under it. I typed, deleted, then typed less. You don't need a speech when the picture is clear. I asked him to check something, tonight. He didn't ask for drama. He asked for details. That's when the plan stopped being a feeling and started being steps. Ryan answered like men who sleep near their phones. Alert first, questions later. "Send me what you have," he said. I sent times, places, a few names I'd heard at our table. He didn't text back a promise. He sent a checklist. I could hear him working while we spoke, the clack of keys, the calm breathing of someone who solves fires, not starts them. We weren't best friends, just good ones once, which is sometimes better. There's less nostalgia, more trust. He told me to stay clear of the ballroom, to keep my hands clean, to let the right people do the right job. Older folks in my life used to say, "Never wrestle a pig, you both get dirty and the pig likes it." I stood under a streetlight that made the sidewalk look like a stage and realized I wasn't the audience anymore. I was the cue. "Give me 15, Ryan said. When the call ended, I looked back at the hotel doors and waited. I've heard Emily laugh 1,000 times. Movie nights, wedding toasts, burned pancakes at 7 a.m. This laugh wasn't any of those. It was louder, brighter, soaked in champagne and attention. She'd found a circle, the kind that closes around itself, and she was the sun in the middle. The jokes sharpened. The compliments turned into little daggers wrapped in glitter. If you've ever stayed too long at a neighborhood barbecue and watched good manners get thin, you know the slope. Her words started landing harder, especially when they brushed against home, against me. I stood near the coat check where the air was cool and the floor was honest. Older men I respect taught me this. When the room turns mean, don't race it there. I slowed my breathing, counted the beats of the music, and let my face go still. Then her voice climbed one more step, just high enough to carry, and I felt the room tilt. The laugh stopped being background. It became a warning. It didn't come whispered, and that's what hurt. I could dump him tomorrow. He's worthless. The words came out clean and proud, like a slogan printed across a billboard. A few people winced, but most just smiled the way you smile when the joke isn't yours to protest. If you're over 30, you learn that betrayal doesn't always slam a door. Sometimes it gives a toast. My chest felt tight, not the sudden kind, but the slow clamp that reminds you of the first time a coach told you to run it off. I didn't run. I didn't move, because movement felt like agreeing to the scene. Instead, I took inventory, a habit from work. What do I know? What did I just hear? Who's standing where? The chandelier hummed. The band fumbled a transition. I realized this moment would anchor everything that came next. I could shout and feed it, or I could step aside and starve it. I chose the second, and that choice changed everything. Being hurt at home is private. Being hurt in public is theater. I felt the knife go in with an audience. Soft gasps, that nervous titter, eyes pretending to be anywhere else. I remembered my mom once telling me, after a messy family argument, "You don't owe the crowd your pain." So I kept my posture. I let the sting pass through without giving it a place to live. My hand found the edge of the counter, the cool wood steady under my palm, and I pictured the breakfast table where we used to plan Saturdays. That memory could have broken me. Instead, it braced me. The climax wasn't the sentence, it was what I did next. I saw the waiter step around a spill, the way pros do, and I decided to do the same. I would step around this mess without slipping. I set my glass down, thanked him, and turned my body toward the exit. The play could go on without me. I had a different stage in mind. Richard Collins had the posture of a man who mistakes height for character. Wedding band tan, watch that said promotion, smile that said permission. He stood too close to Emily, the way people do when boundaries are props. I'd met him once, long enough to hear my own job turned into a punchline. "Numbers guy," said like a gentle insult. Tonight, his hand drifted to her arm as if the room wouldn't notice. Rooms always notice, especially corporate ones. I wasn't jealous. I was awake. There's a difference. Jealousy wants to fight a person. Awareness wants to follow a pattern. I tracked the eyes in that circle. Who looked away, who leaned in, who checked for cameras. An older gentleman from finance flinched when Richard laughed. That told me more than any speech. The climax of this minute wasn't a confrontation. It was a decision. I wouldn't drag this into a shouting match where he's comfortable. I'd pull it into daylight, where proof lives. I turned toward the door. Anger feels powerful, but it spends fast. I remembered my grandfather laying fence posts on a hot July afternoon saying, "If your hands shake, stop swinging." My hands weren't shaking, but my pride was. I kept them still. I flattened my breath. I told myself 3 things in order. Don't bleed in the water. Don't argue with drunks. Don't fix a lie with noise. Someone brushed my shoulder and said, "You good?" I nodded. The man meant well, but well-meaning isn't a blueprint. I checked my watch because it gave my eyes somewhere to go. I thought about the receipts in our kitchen drawer, the way I file insurance papers, the way I keep copies of titles. Those quiet habits suddenly felt like a tool belt. The climax was small and private. I refused the scene. I would not give Emily a villain to point at tomorrow. I would give her silence tonight, and consequences later. I pivoted toward the exit, calm enough to notice the band finally found its beat. Every marriage has a door you don't think you'll ever use. I touched it with my shoulder and felt the cool metal say, "Think first." Outside, New York did what it always does, moved. Taxi horns. A couple arguing softly about a sitter. A delivery guy balancing too much on too little. The city's rhythm steadied mine. I kept my phone in my pocket until the air thinned the heat in my face. Years ago, an older friend told me, "Don't react, respond. Reactions feed the fire. Responses carry water." I wanted water. I wanted facts. I wanted a path that worked in the morning, not just felt good at midnight. I looked back through the glass. Emily was a whirl of silver and smiles. That hurt. It also helped. It told me who she'd chosen tonight. I chose me. The climax came with a simple friction sound, the phone sliding out of my pocket and into my hand. I knew who to call. The number lived in muscle memory. Cold air makes everything sound honest. My breath looked like the truth leaving my mouth, plain and visible. I leaned against the stone pillar and watched a few snowflakes try to decide if they wanted to commit. I thought of small human things older folks know. Label the boxes, keep a spare key with the neighbor, check your credit once a year. It's not romance, but it's how you survive storms. I wasn't a victim. I was a man with options. That recognition felt like heat under my coat. The climax wasn't a burst of bravery. It was acceptance. What I heard inside wasn't an accident. It was a headline. You don't argue with headlines. You keep the paper. I unlocked my phone and scrolled past names that would offer sympathy to the one that would offer structure. Ryan Miller. We hadn't had a beer in years, but trust doesn't spoil if it's stored right. I tapped his name and listened to the first ring cut through the city. He picked up on the second ring, voice steady like a man who wears responsibility without needing applause. "Mark," he said, and it felt like a light going on in a room I'd forgotten. I didn't dump the whole story on him. I gave him the spine, the quote, the closeness, the pattern. He asked the right questions, no gossip, just facts. Who, where, when. Older adults will understand this. When you call the right person, the world gets smaller and clearer. He told me he was near enough to stop by the hotel and observe. Compliance people use that word like a scalpel. It doesn't cut the wrong thing. My heartbeat slowed. He reminded me not to confront, not to collect something the wrong way, not to send emails I'd regret. He would look, listen, then move the ball to the right hands. The climax arrived in a quiet promise. "Give me 15 minutes, and don't go back inside." I agreed. We ended the call with a plan, not fury. Plans fail when they're loud. They grow when they're patient. I texted Ryan a few breadcrumbs, names I'd overheard, the title of the event, the corners of the room where certain people nested. I added 2 dates Emily had business trips that didn't match our calendar. Not accusations, data. I learned that from taxes. Numbers speak best when you let them. He replied with a short checklist. "Don't text Emily. Don't warn anyone. Screenshot anything you already have. Stay put." I followed his rules, the way you follow a calm doctor's orders. A black SUV pulled up, blocking my view, and I stepped 3 feet to the left. That tiny move felt like stepping into a new role. Not the guy standing in the back of the ballroom. The guy who writes down what happened and lets the truth do its work. The climax came as a sensation more than a scene, the first domino wobbling, quiet, inevitable, and already in motion. Ryan texted, "Inside." I pictured him blending in, tie straight, expression neutral, eyes collecting details like a ledger. Minutes stretch when you're outside a storm, but the street kept me anchored. A bus sighed, a cab door thumped, a doorman cursed the wind. I thought about men I admire, steady ones who don't confuse noise with strength. I wanted to be one of them tonight. Another buzz. Regional director just arrived. Energy changed. I could see it in my head, the way a room quiets without meaning to, the way phones get loose in hands. "Don't come in," he wrote. "You'll get what you need." That line landed like a gavel. I leaned back against the stone, not as a man hiding, but as a man holding. The climax arrived with 3 words that read like the start of a verdict. Names being called. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched my own breath in the cold and understood. Sometimes the loudest move is staying out of the frame. Ryan texted 1 word, "inside," and I could picture his suit blending into the wallpaper while his eyes did the heavy lifting. He said the vibe shifted, the way a room does when the teacher walks back in and the class pretends it wasn't talking. I've seen that look at Little League games when an ump shows up late. Order returns. but the nerves stay. From the sidewalk, I watched the revolving door move like a slow clock. The doorman straightened his posture. 2 employees stubbed out cigarettes they were pretending not to smoke. I wasn't in the ballroom, but I felt it in my bones. The party stopped being a party and turned into a meeting. Ryan sent another line. Conversations pausing, eyes moving. That's how storms announce themselves. Quiet first. The climax came with 3 dots. Then, they're forming a circle near the stage. If you've ever been called into the principal's office as a kid, you know that shape. It's not a circle, it's a funnel. Ryan's next text read, Carter here. I'd never met William Carter, but I knew the type. Regional directors don't walk. They part crowds without raising their voice. Ryan described a face set to enough and a tie that had survived a long car ride and a longer day. You don't need volume when authority does the talking. I imagined the way people step back without meaning to, like grocery carts in a sloped parking lot. The band, trained for weddings, probably tried to keep playing, but even a sax knows when to land. Ryan added, he's scanning, not smiling. That told me more than a speech. Men like Carter don't waste looks. They spend them like money. The climax came with a sentence I could almost hear through the glass. He asked for the mic. That's the corporate version of a siren. When the person who signs checks wants a microphone, the room doesn't get music. It gets minutes. And minutes get recorded. Silence doesn't fall. It crawls. It starts by the stage, then slides across the carpet and under the tables. Ryan wrote, people are setting down glasses. That's how you know it's real. Even at funerals, folks keep sipping water. I remembered a pastor once pausing long enough that the pews creaked. That's when the message hit. Carter spoke, and the DJ lowered the volume to a heartbeat. You can hear truths better when your pulse has room. Ryan said he was near the back, angled so he could see faces, not just the front. Smart. He noted who stood with hands clasped, who folded arms, who checked exits. Eyes on Emily, he typed. It's a simple line, but it lands heavy. The climax arrived when he sent, he's naming departments, then names. Names are heavier than titles. Titles can move. Names stay where you put them. And a room full of adults learned the oldest lesson. Accountability sounds different on a microphone. Ryan didn't dress it up. He called Emily Roberts. I imagined the syllables sticking to the chandelier crystals like frost. I've had my name called in stadiums and in waiting rooms. Both raise your heart rate, but only one makes you feel small. She turned. He said that. Slow enough to show fear, fast enough to show she'd hoped it wouldn't be her. People stepped aside. A space opened the way spaces do around accidents. A manager I'd met once stood straighter, as if tall could help. Carter didn't shout. He used that courtroom calm that makes even innocent folks rehearse their alibi. Ryan wrote, she tried to laugh it off. Laughs are useless in a drought. The climax came when Carter asked her to join him up front. That phrase sounds polite, but every adult in America knows it means there's paperwork behind the door. A dozen phones rose chest high, not high enough to be obvious, just high enough to make truth portable. Ryan's words painted the scene like a slow-motion replay. Emily's hand slipped. Her champagne kissed the floor. People remember big speeches, but careers end with small sounds. Ice, crystal, breath. He wrote, she jumped. There's a second when pride tries to start the engine, but the battery's dead. I could see her blinking, looking for a friendly face and finding mirrors. When my father's shop closed years ago, he swept the floor before he turned off the lights. He said, finish well. That line came back to me as Emily stared at the puddle like it had directions. She looked at Richard Collins, Ryan noted the glance, and found no rope thrown. The climax lived in the clatter. That glass didn't just break, it announced what everyone suspected. Spilled champagne is a small mess with a big story. Staff moved like pros, towels, a quiet, excuse me, and the evening changed shape. You can tape a poster back on a wall. You can't unring glass. Carter is asking direct questions, Ryan said. Direct is a kindness when you're innocent and a blade when you're not. He started with travel dates, expense reports, and the magic phrase, help me understand. Every adult in a corporate room has heard it. It means, tell me now before the folder tells me later. Richard tried to step in, Ryan wrote that, and Carter waved him back without breaking eye contact. That gesture is older than any company policy. It says, "This part isn't about you." Emily went for humor. It clanged. Ryan noted a tremor in her voice you only hear when the floor remembers gravity. I pictured Carter's hands, still, resting on a file that had weight before it even opened. The climax came when he used 3 words the IRS loves. Documentation we reviewed. Rooms don't gasp at jargon. They gasp at proof. And proof, carried by someone calm, is heavier than anger shouted by anyone else. Ryan texted what I already knew. People are recording. You can't stop it anymore, and you shouldn't if you're right. I don't mean trial by internet. I mean the accountability that shows up the moment a screen lights. Folks held their phones just below shoulder level, the polite zone, careful enough to claim innocence, ready enough to keep a copy. A junior associate I'd seen at a barbecue once had that look kids get at fireworks, both awe and fear. Ryan said security hovered, not to stop filming, but to watch tempers. No tempers flared. That tells you a lot. Anger thrives when truth is vague. It shrinks when evidence arrives. The climax was quiet. HR stepped in with a folder. If legal is the hammer, HR is the hinge. Doors open and close on hinges. The DJ let the song fade without a new one starting. In the absence of music, you hear real time, and real time has a way of writing history. Emily turned toward circles that had welcomed her all year and found them wider than before. I've been in rooms where a joke dies and nobody wants to claim the body. This felt worse. Ryan said the smiles folded first, then the shoulders. Richard looked smaller without laughter to lean on. A few people check the exits the way you check your mirrors when a siren sings. Empires don't fall, they get unhosted. Ryan typed, "She's talking fast, then stopping." That cadence is familiar to anyone who's ever tried to explain a late bill. You run out of road mid-sentence. The climax came when Carter said the 4 words every adult hears like a verdict. "We'll take this offline." Translation, the public part is over. The consequences are not. 2 security guards moved 3 steps closer. Not threatening, just official. And in a room built for making people feel special, Emily discovered how small a spotlight gets when the power cuts. I drove a slow square around the block, the way you do when you're killing time before a hard conversation. The radio stayed low. A Mets score crept by, then a weather warning that never quite materialized. Ryan fed me updates like a play-by-play announcer who respects silence. Expense reports on screen. I pictured line items flipping like index cards. Hotel charges, 2 guests. Receipts have a language older folks know well. They don't care about tone. They tally. I passed a diner where the pies still sit under glass and made a note to come back when my stomach remembered how. "Compliance present," Ryan wrote. Clean sentence, sharp edge. I parked under a streetlight that made the dashboard look like a stage. The climax came when my phone buzzed with a short clip. No faces, just audio. Carter saying, "Effective immediately." Those 2 words work like a key turning. Something locked. Something else opened. I turned off the car to hear the world better. Ryan's final text before the hour turned said, "Escorted out." Not arrested. This isn't a TV show, but escorted, which is worse in some ways. It's the adult version of being walked to the door by a teacher who knows your parents. He added, "Access disabled. If you've ever had a keycard go red, you know the thud it puts in your stomach." The crowd thinned. The phones went away. The building exhaled. I sat there, not cheering, not gloating, just finished with the part where denial lives. The climax wasn't her leaving. It was my decision to let the system do the work while I stayed still. Older men I trust always said, "Win the right way or don't bother." Tonight, the right way looked like patience, documentation, and other people saying the words for me. I started the engine, merged into traffic, and felt the city fold around me. Somewhere behind those glass doors, her story had changed tense, from present to past. Mine had not. I got home to a quiet apartment that still smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. I made coffee I didn't really want and cleared the kitchen table like I was prepping for a school project. Older folks will understand this. When life spins, you pick a flat surface and start a list. I turned on a lamp, opened a notebook, and wrote 3 lines. People, paper, plan. Under people, I wrote a single name. Attorney. Under paper, bank statements, titles, passwords, insurance. Under plan, steps I could explain to a judge and my mother. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was building a record. My dad used to say, "Do it slow enough to do it once." So I slowed down. I pulled folders from a box labeled Home, logged into accounts I manage, and looked, not to move yet, but to know. The climax was small and steady. I drew boxes beside each item and felt my breath even out. I would check them off in daylight, not anger. I found the business card a coworker had given me, just in case. Nobody plans to use those. I dialed and got a receptionist with the kind of calm voice you hear in good offices and hospitals. "Family law," she said, like a shield. I gave my name, answered basic questions, and she put me on a brief hold. The attorney came on with no nonsense and no judgment. "Start at the present," he said. So I did. The quote, the public scene, the pattern. He asked about assets, accounts, titles, beneficiaries. If you're over 30, you've filled out those forms. They matter now. He gave me homework. Do not confront. Do not move anything without documentation. Do not access anything that isn't already yours to access. "We'll file in the morning," he said. He emailed me a list of documents and a draft petition. The climax came with his final line. "You don't need to win tonight. You need to be ready tomorrow." I closed the laptop gently. Morning makes everything colder and clearer. I brewed a fresh pot and opened the joint account, the savings, the credit cards. I didn't sweep money like a movie villain. I followed the attorney's instructions like someone signing for a package. I printed the last 12 months of statements, dates, amounts, notes. Numbers don't take sides, but they do tell stories. I highlighted transfers that didn't match our calendar and business trips that didn't match my memory. I also printed my pay stubs, our mortgage statements, and a snapshot of balances taken this exact hour. If you've ever balanced a checkbook at the kitchen table, you know the feeling. Facts clicking into place. Where transfers were appropriate and permitted, I moved our emergency fund into an account in my name only. Documented, time-stamped, fully traceable, so the roof over my head didn't depend on someone else's apology. The climax came when the printer spit out the last page and I wrote in ink, "Copies made." Not dramatic, but decisive. I opened the file where we kept the grown-up stuff, the deed, the car titles, the homeowners and auto policies, the wills we always said we'd update. Paper has weight you feel in your hands. I scanned each document to a folder named with today's date, then put the originals back where they belonged. I called the insurance agent, the one who sends holiday cards and remembers birthdays. We reviewed beneficiaries and coverage like two people checking the weather before a long drive. No surprises, which is the best kind of news when you're tired. I made a list of utilities and logins, the unglamorous backbone of a household: gas, electric, internet. If you're old enough to have switched providers for a better rate, you know this drill. The climax was practical. A small lockbox under the sink now held a thumb drive with everything scanned. I labeled it with blue tape and a date. Boring? Absolutely. But boring armor stops a lot of arrows. We'd once laughed about prenups over takeout, said love made them silly. Looking at the folder, I didn't feel smug. I felt sober. The attorney explained how our state handles marital assets without a prenup, who contributed, what's joint, what's separate, what's fair. It wasn't a free-for-all, it was a map. I made peace with what that meant. If you've ever shared a toolbox with someone, you know the rule. Some tools are yours, some are theirs, some you bought together. The law sees it the same way. I wrote down the items we'd have to discuss, and the ones that were clearly mine. Retirement accounts in my name before the marriage, a small inheritance I never touched, the savings I built from extra shifts. The climax came with an inner adjustment. I stopped expecting justice to feel like victory. It would feel like order, and order was enough. I closed the notebook and realized I wasn't trying to punish Emily. I was trying to protect tomorrow. There's a kind of kindness in being clear. I filled a manila folder with copies, not originals, of what mattered. The petition draft, bank snapshots, a simple timeline, and a short letter in my own handwriting. We'll talk with lawyers present, it read. Until then, here are the facts. I added a USB labeled with the date and the word records, not a trap, a mirror. I placed the folder on the kitchen counter where we keep the mail and left it closed. If you're old enough to have mediated between kids, you know the power of a boundary you can point to. I also packed a small tote with the essentials, documents, meds, a few clothes, because leaving in calm is better than leaving in chaos. The climax wasn't the folder itself, it was what it represented. No more arguing in circles, no more changing the subject. Paper is patient and precise. I checked the time. Emily would be home soon. The coffee had gone cold. I didn't warm it up. I heard her keys before I saw her. Metal on wood, that familiar rattle with a new shake in it. Emily stepped in like a storm that had already blown itself out. Makeup smudged, hair fighting gravity, the kind of silence you only get after a very public day. I've seen that look on coworkers after layoffs and on neighbors after funerals. You recognize it by the way they hold their shoulders, braced for a hit that already landed. She scanned the room, found me at the table, and for a second we were two people who once knew everything about each other standing in a place where nothing felt familiar. She asked, "What did you do?" The words sounded rehearsed, like she'd said them in a mirror. The climax was simple. I didn't answer the question she wanted. I gestured to the folder. "This is what's been done," I said. "By both of us. Pick it up when you're ready." She stared like it was heavier than it looked. She opened the folder as if it might bite. The first page was the timeline, then account snapshots, then the letter from me. Her eyes moved the way a person reads bad news they hope will change if they blink. Denial is a strong engine, but paper isn't impressed. "You can't just," she started. I kept my voice level, the way you talk to customer service when you need help, not sympathy. "I didn't just anything," I said. "I followed counsel. Everything is documented." My attorney's card sat on top like a seatbelt. If you've ever returned a broken item with a receipt, you know the posture. Calm, prepared, not hostile. She looked for a loophole, then for my temper. Neither showed up. The climax came when she found the line about separate counsel for her. I'd put 3 names and numbers from a neutral referral service. "You'll need your own advocate," I said. For the first time that morning, she stopped arguing and started listening. Shock removes words first. Emily's face ran out of sentences. She looked around as if the room might prompt her lines. "When my father lost his job, he stood at our sink, dried his hands, and said, 'Okay.' That word built our plan. I waited for Emily's version. It didn't come. She asked where I'd moved the money. I pointed to the printed statements with timestamps and balances. She demanded to know why I was doing this to her. I nodded toward the transcript of her own words, the ones that hurt as much as any receipt. "We can talk in mediation," I said. "Not here, not now." The climax of that minute wasn't a shout. It was the way her shoulders sank when she realized the audience had gone home and the microphones were off. Real life had arrived with a clipboard. She closed the folder, not gently, and rested both hands on it like it might leave if she didn't. I didn't move. Silence did the teaching. She stared at me, and I saw recognition elbow its way past pride. "You think this makes you strong?" she said. I shook my head. "No, it makes me responsible." I slid the final page across the table. A simple list of next steps: service, mediation dates, temporary arrangements. Older adults will know this feeling. When the plan is boring and hard, you're probably on the right road. I stood, not to loom, but to end the scene. "You called me worthless," I said, voice steady. "This is the opposite of worthless. Organized, lawful, and done in daylight." That was the climax. Not a zinger, not a victory lap, just a sentence that named the new truth. I took my tote, left the spare keys on the hook we always miss, and walked to the door I never thought I'd use. Behind me, the lamp still burned over the neat stack of paper. Ahead of me, the hallway smelled like dust and possibility. I closed the door softly and kept walking. I left the manila folder closed, but the USB had a label: Records. Emily slid it into her laptop like she was defusing a bomb. The audio started clean, no music, no crowd, just her voice from the ballroom. I could dump him tomorrow, he's worthless. Hearing it at home was worse. Public humiliation stings, private confirmation settles in your bones. She slapped the spacebar like she could stop the past. Older folks know that feeling, listening to a voicemail twice, hoping it sounds different the second time. It never does. She looked up at me, hunting for a technicality. You recorded me? I shook my head. You recorded you. I saved it. The room felt smaller, the way kitchens do during hard talks. I remembered my dad saying, "If you want mercy later, tell the truth first." That wasn't tonight. The climax came when the last word, worthless, hung in the air and didn't fall. Silence agreed with the facts. We both heard it. There was nothing to argue with. Her phone lit up like a siren. Mom. Patricia Roberts isn't a soft landing. She built a real estate business when interest rates still scared people and paperwork lived in filing cabinets. Emily answered on speaker, an old habit that suddenly felt like a hearing. Patricia skipped hello. Why did I get notices about title changes? If you've ever had a parent ask a question you can't dodge, you know the weight. Emily tried to steer the conversation toward me. Patricia steered it back with one sentence. What did you do? She didn't mean the paperwork. She meant the pattern. Older adults know that tone, the one that says, I raised you better than this. Emily's voice thinned. She said the word misunderstanding like it might open a door. It didn't. The climax came when Patricia lowered her voice instead of raising it. Fix what you can. Own what you can't. The call ended without comfort. The kitchen felt like a courtroom after the judge leaves. No gavel, just consequences. Patricia had been looped into our major purchases years ago, co-signer on one, guarantor on another. Smart moves when you're building a life. Those choices meant she received every change I made, stamped and dated. Emily scrolled through her email like she might find a version where the subject lines were nicer. Notice of removal, beneficiary update, account snapshot. Paper doesn't care about tone. I remembered standing at a bank counter with my grandfather as he taught me to endorse a check. Always know where your name is. It's a simple rule that saves a lot of pain. Emily stared at the subject lines, then at me, then at the folder. The climax came when she realized the trail didn't start tonight. It stretched back. Policies, titles, statements. Quiet steps that made noise only when you listen. She closed her eyes like she could rewind a week, a month, a habit. When she opened them, she wasn't angry. She was adrift. And adrift is where truth finally has room. Patricia called back, voice like a straight edge. You mistook quiet for weak, she said to her daughter. Quiet men aren't weak. They're dangerous because they're patient. I didn't gloat. I listened. Older adults will recognize that speech. It's the one you give when you've paid late fees and learned not to. Patricia wasn't praising me. She was explaining reality to Emily. You wanted the spotlight, she went on, but the paperwork lives backstage. Emily tried to pivot to love, to marriage, to working it out. Patricia didn't bite. You can work with honesty, she said. You can't work with lies. The climax came when Patricia shifted from lecture to logistics. Get a lawyer, stop talking, start paying attention. The call ended with the click of a woman who's closed doors before. For a long minute, the only sound in our kitchen was the clock we never set right. The hands kept moving anyway. There's a lesson in that. Time doesn't ask for your permission. Support disappears in layers. First, the friendly texts dry up, then the invitations pause, then the family voice changes. I watched Emily experience all three in one morning. Messages buzzed and then stopped. The group chat that once overflowed with exclamation points went dim. She called a coworker. It went to voicemail. Called another. He sent a text back. Can't talk. Older folks know that code. It means, I'm not getting near this. She looked at me like I might throw her a rope. I didn't. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. You have names for counsel, I said, tapping the folder. The climax was gentle but final. She sat down, both hands on the counter, and asked, What happens now? The first honest question of the day. Now, I said, the process happens. She nodded like a student who finally opened the textbook. Outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. Life went on. That's the quiet part nobody prepares you for. The world keeps moving. By afternoon, my cousin texted a link. He's not a drama guy. He sends fishing photos and lawn tips. The link said enough. Someone had cleaned the audio from the ballroom and paired it with Emily's raised glass. Caption: when you think you're untouchable. Older adults have watched the internet turn small moments into billboards. This one sped. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, same sentence, same laugh. I didn't share it. I didn't comment. I turned the phone face down and let the tide pull where it was already going. Emily paced, then froze. Another call from a friend who used to cheer the loudest. I can't be in this, the friend said. The climax came when the clip hit LinkedIn. That's where reputations pretend to wear ties. Business coaches wrote threads about ethics. A compliance blog used it as a case study. You learn fast that a public life has two doors: applause and archive. Once archived, it's searchable, and searchable is forever. I tell my students at the community class I sometimes teach, never read the comments. They read you. Still, they found us. Former coworkers told stories, small ones that add up. Who took credit, who cut lines, who kept score. Not all were fair, but enough rang true to sting. Emily stood at the sink, scrolling like she was trying to climb back up a chute. Older adults know how words can bruise even when you don't see the hand. A junior employee posted laughing emojis. Another wrote, "Explains a lot." The internet doesn't debate, it piles. The climax was a message from someone I didn't expect. Her old mentor. "I'm sorry. Take care." Not a defense, not an attack. A period. When a mentor stops arguing your case, the case is over. I took a walk around the block, breathing into a scarf I'd owned for a decade. It smelled like winters that didn't hurt. I needed that reminder that the world still had gentler rooms. The email subject line did what subject lines rarely do. It told the truth. Meeting today, 2:00 p.m., bring handbook and company property. If you've ever been through a layoff, you know that language. It's corporate for, "We're almost done here." Emily read it twice, then a third time as if one would graduate into mercy. She asked if she should go. "Yes," I said. "With a lawyer if you can." Older adults understand that advice. Show up, behave, document. She left early, carrying a laptop that suddenly felt heavier than a brick. The apartment went quiet in a way that made you hear the refrigerator hum. I cleaned the counter because it was something I could finish. The climax arrived by text. Conference room set up like a panel. Ryan again, brief and careful. HR, legal, compliance, director. The grown-up table. No confetti this time, just folders. It's amazing how quickly you can feel the difference between a party and a proceeding. All that changed was the purpose. Ryan's messages came like mile markers. Hotel receipts on screen. I pictured a projector throwing dates and amounts onto a beige wall, the way truth always looks under office lights, flat and undeniable. 2 guests listed, company card. Then, audio snippets about planning around suspicion. That last part had gravity. Words in context, paired with charges, build bridges juries walk across. Older folks have learned this in smaller ways. A bill next to a contract, a signature next to a date. Emily texted me once from the room. Only 2 words. "It's bad." I didn't reply. Sympathy trims edges you sometimes need sharp. The climax, Ryan wrote, arrived when legal said the phrase that empties a room of hope. "We will pursue recovery." Not might. Will. He added that she kept staring at a water glass like it might offer a second chance. Water helps a choke. It doesn't rewrite a ledger. The panel stood. The decision had been waiting. It just needed to be read. At 3:40, Ryan sent the last line. Terminated. Security escort. Corporate endings don't slam doors. They whoosh. A card stops working. An elevator key turns dumb. A box appears under a desk like a stage direction. Emily walked out through a lobby that had once held her reflection like a promise. Today it held it like a warning. If you've ever carried your belongings past people who won't meet your eye, you know the weight isn't in the box. It's in the silence. I wasn't parked outside to witness it. I was at my table writing next steps like a person finishing a checklist. Service, mediation, housing. The climax wasn't the firing. It was the horizon that replaced the ceiling. Termination ends one set of decisions and begins another. Maybe charges, definitely consequences. For her, it was a reckoning. For me, it was a release. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and let the room be dark for a minute. Darkness can be honest, too. I didn't need to be on the sidewalk to see it. Ryan's text and the timestamp painted it well enough. Still, later, a photo reached me, a blurry shot from a distance. Emily stepping out of Harrington Tower with a cardboard box that looked heavier than it should. If you've ever carried a box after a move, you know the weight isn't in the things, it's in the leaving. Inside the flaps, a dying plant, a mug with a slogan, a picture frame tilted forward like it wanted to jump. Security kept a polite space around her, the way people do around grief. She didn't cry. Pride doesn't always leak. Sometimes it dries. That image didn't give me joy. It gave me closure. The climax landed in a quiet sentence I said out loud to no one. That chapter's over. Doors don't slam at places like Harrington. They whoosh. But a whoosh can be final, too. I set my phone face down and let the room be still. I saw her from across the avenue later that week by accident. New York plays those tricks. She didn't see me. I stood behind a bus shelter poster looking at the glass more than at her, the way you do when you want a view but not a memory. I felt not nothing, but not rage. Think of the feeling after shoveling snow. Tired, warm, done. Older adults will understand this. Sometimes restraint is not a performance. It's a preference. I didn't wave or hide. I didn't savor or sulk. I watched the light turn and let the crowd carry her away like a current. The climax was internal. I realized I didn't need her to witness my calm for it to be real. Vindication doesn't require an audience. It requires a choice. When the walk sign blinked, I crossed in the opposite direction, hand in my coat pocket, breathing like the air finally fit in my chest. Small steps, big peace. No scene, no second take. News travels in small sentences. Thompson's out, Ryan texted. A day later, his wife filed. If you're over 30, you've watched a bad decision ripple outward. First the person, then the circle, then the home. I didn't celebrate. I took note. Actions found their owners. There's a strange fairness to that, like a bill finally landing in the right mailbox. I remembered a neighbor from my childhood who kept 2 sets of books, until one day he didn't keep any. His wife's eyes at the grocery store said everything. With Thompson, the facts had the cold shine of office lights, travel receipts, policy violations, personal choices dressed as business. The climax wasn't the firing. It was the silence that followed. No farewell email, no thanks for the memories. Just an empty parking space and a plate on LinkedIn that changed from about to open to work. I closed the message thread with Ryan and went back to my list. Other people's endings weren't my job. My next steps were, a high school friend sent it, then a cousin, then my barber. Same caption under the same clip. Worthless? He wasn't. Someone added a stingy drum hit on the word wasn't, and the internet did what the internet does. Stacked laughs on top of lessons. Older adults know both truths. Jokes travel faster than apologies, and a reputation can be 1 sentence wide. I didn't forward it. I didn't heart it. I learned long ago that attention is a currency you shouldn't spend on people who owe you. Still, I watched once, in full, then put the phone down. The climax was personal. That line used to hurt. Now it measured the distance traveled. I wasn't the man in that sentence anymore, not in my own mind. There's power in letting a label float past without catching it. I washed a sink full of dishes I should have done yesterday and realized simple chores are better than victory laps. Soap, rinse, rack. Clean plates make quiet rooms. The Brooklyn apartment wasn't fancy, but the lock turned easy and the heat worked. I hung my keys on a hook I installed crooked on purpose, a reminder that perfect is optional and progress isn't. First night, I ate Thai takeout on a moving blanket and used a book as a table. If you've ever started over, you know the ritual. 1 lamp, 1 chair, 2 thoughts. How did I get here, and what's next? I set up the most important things first. The coffee maker, the router, a small shelf for documents. The mattress arrived late. I slept anyway. The climax came the next morning, opening the blinds to a modest view, a brick wall with a stubborn tree determined to find light. I felt something lift in my chest that wasn't triumph. It was room. Life didn't get bigger. It got clearer. I brewed a pot and let the place learn my name with the smell. A home doesn't need applause. It needs use. There's a Starbucks on the corner that doesn't judge the unshaven. I ordered a plain coffee, no parade, and took a seat by the window where the sun knows how to come in at 10 a.m. The barista misheard my name as Mark, and for once I didn't correct it. A small wrong that felt like a fresh start. I sipped and felt my shoulders drop in a way I hadn't noticed they'd been up. Older adults will get this. Peace announces itself in the body first. The unclenched jaw, the slower swallow, the way a chair suddenly fits. A guy in a Union jacket nodded at me. I nodded back. That recognition between strangers who've both been through something. The climax was the first long exhale that didn't catch. It carried the last of the ballroom out of me. The cup went warm to cool, and I let it. Not everything needs to be hot to be good. I left a tip, wiped a ring of coffee off the table, and stepped into noon. The biggest change wasn't the address, it was the quiet. Not the lonely kind, the spacious kind. No more checking the temperature of a room before I spoke. No more translating sighs. I played a record too loud and then turned it down because I wanted to, not because I had to. I put a dented pan on the stove and made eggs the way my dad taught me. Low heat, patience, salt last. If you've ever lived with someone who confused sharp with smart, you know the relief of soft. I found old shirts I'd stopped wearing because they started fights and wore one like armor against nothing at all. The climax came when I laughed at my own burned toast and didn't brace to be told it wasn't funny. Freedom can sound like small laughter in a kitchen that doesn't punish it. I cleaned the pan and left it to dry without wiping every drop. Imperfect is still clean. I exhaled and meant it. I built a schedule that wouldn't impress anyone and satisfied me completely. Work on time, gym after, pasta Wednesday, laundry Saturday. I read at night, a chapter, not a crusade. I rediscovered how good it feels to finish one thing at a time. Older folks understand the dignity in routine. It keeps your hands busy while your heart learns new steps. I called my mother more, not to report, but to talk. I fixed a wobbly chair with wood glue and patience. The chair sat still after that, like a reward. I walked past a bookstore and bought a paperback I'd promised to read for years. The climax was a quiet realization at the sink. I no longer organized my day around someone else's storms. My calendar had weather of its own, steady, forecastable, mine. I turned off lights room by room, not because I had to save money, though that's smart, but because it felt good to see the apartment settle into sleep. I used to think justice had to be loud to land. Now I know better. The loud moments are movies. The lasting ones are minutes you stack like bricks. Silence isn't surrender when it's paired with a plan. It's grip. It's choosing your ground and your timing and letting other people choose their consequences. If you're over 30, you've already learned versions of this in smaller arenas. Budgeting, parenting, caring for aging parents. You pick your fights, you document, you breathe. The climax of this chapter came not with a victory pose, but with a sentence I wrote on a sticky note above my desk. Calm is a tactic. It reminded me that the best outcomes aren't about winning arguments. They're about building realities that don't need them. I'm not proud of what happened. I'm proud of how I responded. Hot feels good, cold works. And worthless? That word belongs to a night that's over. I kept the receipt, the one that proves I left it there. She called me worthless. Tonight proves otherwise. I didn't win by shouting in a ballroom. I won by choosing silence, law, and order. Paper beat pride. Process beat performance. And the fallout didn't need my hands on it, only my patience. If you've lived long enough, you know the sweetest victories don't spike, they settle. I'm not angry anymore. I'm clear. My life is smaller in all the good ways. Coffee that tastes like breathing, a lock that turns, a room that doesn't punish laughter. That's the point. Revenge isn't hot. Hot flares, burns out, leaves scars on the wrong people. The best revenge is cold, measured, documented, final, so the consequences land exactly where they belong. I kept the receipts kept me. Now a question for you. When the heat rises, what will you choose? The quick fire that feels good, or the cold plan that works? Comment hot or cold, and tell me why. Your story starts here. Choose wisely.